Have you ever wondered how it's like to practice jazz piano? I have. I used to find it hard to get a good routine on my practicing, and not to mention how hard it can be to practice jazz piano rather than written music. So what I've done over the years is to develop a system that I've used myself when I practice jazz piano. Then, once I had the chance to tweak the system so it really works, I started to show the system to my students, where they all seem to see the whole picture suddenly and a major improvement in their own skills for playing jazz piano. Today, I'll show you the system and how I've been practicing for years, and then I'll share with you a brand new app for tracking your progress over time to make the practicing even more fun. All of this and more after we've thanked our sponsor of this episode.
Do you play jazz piano as a hobby, but you find that the autumn never really leaves? Do you really have the time to figure it all out by yourself? Or would you prefer a better option where you got the guidance from a professional? Introducing the Jazz Piano Step-by-Step course. This is a complete learning program where you'll be guided from point A, where you are at today, to point B, where you want to be in the future. No need to figure things out for yourself anymore. Get the help you need and your music deserves. Sign up to a 14 days free trial today at popjazzonline.com and see for yourself that the autumn leaves and your music thrives. The Jazz Piano Step-by-Step course is one of the most comprehensive online jazz piano programs that feels like having a real one-by-one piano teacher, only better. Go to popjazzonline.com and sign up for your 14 days free trial today.
So, to practice jazz piano, there are many things I could have said about how to practice jazz piano, but the most important thing is, of course, that you get a good practicing routine. And I found that over the years, I need to practice in 3 different ways. And I'll go over to my computer now, and I'll show you the 3 different ways. But before I do, please, if you like this video, please hit like and subscribe, and then hit the bell button, and I'll give you more videos like this later on. Alright, I'll go over to my computer now, and I'll see you there. So, now you're inside of my computer, welcome. And I will show you the 3 main methods that I've been using for practicing jazz piano for many years now. And these are also the 3 methods that my students are using too. I believe they are outstanding and gives the best possible results in the shortest amount of time. So now I will show you the 3 biggest problems that I see my students find hard to solve. Then I will quickly show you the solution, and then I will show you the 3 ways to practice. So let's start with the 3 most prominent problems. To be clear, I have dealt with all of these problems myself. The first problem I see that people are struggling with when it comes to practicing jazz piano is that they don't have a proper plan. What happens if you don't have a plan? You get easily distracted and your practicing will be mediocre. Then the second problem I see that people are struggling with is that they don't finish what they started in the first place. Maybe you have experienced the same. You start working on a tune, but you never finish. Then you start to practice a scale, but you never really master the scale either. And so on and so forth. Believe me, I used to do this a lot. The third problem I see is that when people are practicing jazz piano, it is really tough to know for sure what to practice to improve. Let's say you want to practice. You dedicate some time to practice. But then when you get in front of your piano, you don't know what to practice. What scale should you practice today? What song? But more importantly, why? It's easy to become confused when you're going to practice jazz piano, as it is pretty complex. So, the solutions. When it comes to the first problem, where you practice without a proper plan, the answer is simple. Just make a plan. Now, it can be smart to have an overall plan and then a detailed plan. The overall plan is more of the big picture, and I found that it helps a lot to ask the right questions. For example, why do I want to play jazz piano in the first place? Or what will I be able to play, and by when? Once you have established the overall plan, you should think more about the detailed plan. The detailed plan could include questions like, what chords do I need to learn? What scales do I need to learn? Who will I copy? And more. Back to the second problem. It's easy to start a project without finishing it, right? Think of anything you'll ever practice as a small or a large project. Then make a rule for yourself. Always finish the current project before you move on to the next project. To do so, it's really smart to decide the desired outcome first. For example, I will learn the melodic minor scale so that I can play it fluently in all keys. Or I will be able to copy or transcribe 3 rounds of Bill Evans' Waltz for Debbie solos so that I can play them fluently. Whatever you do, decide the desired outcome for all of your projects. I promise this helps. So back to the third problem. When playing jazz piano, it's tough to know exactly what to practice to improve. There is a simple solution to this problem too. Just get help from someone who can outline a good plan for you. Before you have an excellent piano teacher, it can be beneficial to know precisely what you're seeking through your music. And that connects, of course, to the overall plan that I just mentioned. Once you have reflected about all of this, it will be time to do the work. You have to practice to get results. The more you practice, the better, but even more importantly, how you practice is even more important. To be able to play jazz piano well, you'll sooner or later realize how complex this can be. Over the years, I've experimented on myself and my students on the best ways to practice. So to get a complete practicing routine, I found that the smartest thing to do is to practice in 3 different ways. The first way is what I call the 25-50-25 method. The second way is what I call the one thing method. And the third way is what I call the just playing method. So the first method is the one that you should do the most. Let me explain what the 25-50-25 method is all about. It's pretty simple and straightforward. The first 25 means 25% of your session that you should dedicate to warm-up exercises. For example, if you practice for 1 hour, the first 15 minutes you'll do warm-up exercises. The type of warm-up exercises should be playing a particular dominant 7th voicing for 15 minutes or learn and practice the melodic minor scale for 15 minutes. Whatever it is that you're doing, make sure to start slow when you're warming up. And now the second part, called 50 main practice. Now you should practice 50% of the session on your main project or main projects. So if you're practicing for 1 hour, that will be 30 minutes to whatever project you're doing. For example, is your current plan to transcribe and play 3 rounds of a Bill Evans solo? Then push this project forward for the next 30 minutes. Just work it out bit by bit until you have completed the project. The third and last part of your session is what I call 25 free play. If you practice for 1 hour, then the very last 15 minutes now you can spend on whatever you like. It's free time. Now you have the time to explore and play new ideas. For example, you can just play your favorite tune and see where you'll go from there. Personally, when I practice, I very often find myself practice for more than 15 minutes in the end, since it is so fun. That's another reason for why this method seems to work so well, since you want to practice more than you set out for in the first place. Let me also say that this method works the best if you're practicing for 1 hour or 2 hours. If you practice for more than that, you should not, of course, warm up for that long. Let's move on to the second way of practicing. That is what I call the one thing method. And this is pretty straightforward. You practice just one thing for the whole session. For example, you practice the transcription of Bill Evans' solo for 1 hour straight. That's it. The third way to practice is what I call the just playing method. As jazz musicians, we have to explore new ideas and sometimes just play. So what you can do here is to improvise and maybe compose a new melody, play through your repertoire of jazz standards that you know, where you write down new ideas that occur. Whatever you do in a session like this, you should make sure that you stay focused, right? And also when you make it fun for yourself, you will remember the feeling, and that will make you want to come back to your piano the next day to continue. So, how much should you practice? That's up to you. I see that the students of mine who have the most success practice 10 hours per week or more. And that is if you have the piano as a hobby. But how much is not everything when it comes to practice. Even more important is your ability to focus. And let me show you a couple of specific tips. When you're going to practice jazz piano, it's important to get rid of 2 kinds of distractions. And the first one is if you have got one of these. This is a phone or could be anything else. Always make sure to turn off the notifications or put in to flight mode or... Sorry about that. At least, yeah, don't bring the phone. That's the takeaway. And the other one is internal distractions. So we got external distractions and internal distractions. And internal distractions could be what's going on in your head while you're playing. And I used to get easily distracted while I was quote unquote practicing in the past, right? So I used to practice like this. I was setting out to, for example, play a tune such as this one. That's Blame It on My Youth. So if I was practicing this in the past, I could do something like this. Now I was switching between three types of tunes or three types of things to practice instead of just focus on one of them and finish this before you move on to the next one. But the cure for this and the medicine is to use a timer. So now when I'm practicing, I'm using a timer to set up boundaries. So that means for the next 15 minutes or so, I'll just practice this particular tune. And I'm not allowing myself to go any further or practicing anything else before it beeps on my timer. So what I like to say is that I use the timer all the timer. Let me walk us through now how I would practice. So if I want to practice for 1 hour, I would decide now to practice the 25-50-25 method, which is warm up for 15 minutes and then the main part for 30 minutes and the last part, which is free play on the last 25%, which is 15 minutes in the end. Altogether 1 hour. So I would have a timer. I'm using a timer on my phone, put it on 15 minutes, and then I would practice just a scale or a chord for 15 minutes. And when the timer beeps, I would move on to the main project. And the main project could be something that you're working on for many weeks. So let's say I was currently working on copying Keith Jarrett playing Autumn Leaves, just by ear. That's a lot of work. So if you're doing such a thing, then you should do that now and move on for the next 30 minutes. Then you should move on with this project, right? And don't be tempted to do anything else but this for the next 30 minutes. And then when the timer beeps again, now you should practice the free play, what I call. So the free play part is where you are allowing yourself to get more creative and do more creative things than just the main project that you're currently working on. And then the timer beeps again and 1 hour passes by very quick. So I find personally that the 1 hour is very often far too little to do what I want to do. That's a good thing, because then that takes my piano playing to the next level easily. Now, there are two more ways to practice, as I said before. So what you should do is to also add some sessions with one thing practice. And if I do that, I would just sit down, for example, and do my main project for 1 hour or 2 hours. Every now and then, I'm also adding some just playing practicing sessions. And this is, as I said, where you sit down and you just play whatever you feel like. And now, what is really crucial is that you should still use the timer. So the reason for this is that now you should stay 100% focused in what you're doing. It's so easy to just get internal distractions all the time, or you find yourself suddenly by the fridge while you were supposed to be behind the piano. Whatever it is, keep the timer and keep it running and play until the timer beeps, and then you can move on. I hope that made sense, but what about motivation? How can you stay motivated to practice piano over time? Well, to stay motivated, you should be clear on why you practice piano in the first place. And I cover a lot about this in another video about the philosophy of practicing piano that you can find on my website. But what can also help you and me to stay motivated over time is if we track our progress from day to day, week to week. So what I did, or what I just did actually, is to create an app that I give out to you for free. And let me go over to my computer again and show you how this works and how it's all interconnected. So welcome back to my computer. What you see here is the app I created to help you stay on track with your practicing. In order to use this, all you need is a Google account, which is free, and you can have this sheet for free as well. So let me demonstrate all the bells and whistles of this app, or maybe I should say Google Sheet. Thanks, Google. First of all, the point now is to track your progress every week and help you practice as much as you intended to practice. The app is divided into one box per week over a year. The next year you simply make a copy of the previous year, then delete the data and start over again. Then you set your weekly goal up here. You can override this per week, so if you are on a vacation or whatever, then you can simply just adjust the goal for this week to something more or less, depending on what kind of vacation you're having. Once you have set your weekly target, for example 10 hours per week, you can start to practice. The column to the left of each box is related to 3 ways to practice what I've shown you in this video. This means warm up 25% of your session. So here you type in what you plan to practice. For example, the melodic minor scale in the key of E flat and maybe the A and B voicings. The yellow column means your main project that you're working on, and as I said, maybe you're working on these for several weeks. For example, maybe I'm learning to play the jazz standard Donna Lee, or maybe I'm copying the Herbie Hancock solo. Whatever it is, make sure to don't add too many projects simultaneously, and also make sure to complete all the projects before you move on to new projects. The green columns means free play 25 and free play 100. If you don't remember, free play 25 is the last 15 minutes of your 25-50-25 session, provided that you practice for 1 hour that day. The FP 100 means free play for 100% of your time. I strongly suggest that you add at least one session like this every week. If you need explanations on what all of this means, simply hover over the cells to see explanations. Then there are 2 more rows, 1T meaning one thing. This is where you practice for a full session on just one thing from your main practice. It is smart to add at least 2 sessions like this. The last row is called Listen. If you want to learn to play jazz piano, one crucial thing to do is to listen to one record over and over. If I was to copy Herbie Hancock this week, I would probably add one of his recordings to my list and listen to this over and over. The more relevant to what you're working on, the better. Alright, now it's filled out, so the next thing that you do is of course to practice. Use the timer, then simply type in how much you practice each day. For example, I practiced the scale for 15 minutes almost every day and the 2-5-1 progressions on the other days. As you can tell, it automatically sums up how much you practiced. There's also a progress bar that shows your progress related to your goal, so let me continue to fill up some more time here. What you also can see is that once you do the work, you'll get some status updates. The goal is to get to 100% complete each and every week. Not only will you feel better, but you'll play a lot better too, of course provided that you practice a reasonable amount of hours that particular week. If you practice for more than 10% above your set goal, then you'll get even more praise. Very good! Let me fill out some dummy data for week 1 to 5 and I'll type it in extremely quick. Just hold on. There it is. As you can see, I did good in week 1 and 2, but in week 3, I only practiced for 8 hours. This is okay as long as you do some extra sessions in the following week. What I did then was to add 2 more hours in week number 4. So the average will be the same as the goal. Okay. The last thing I want to show you is the performance. But before I do, let me type in some more results until the current week, which is week 37. Now I will type even faster than before. Alright, there you have it. So let's have a look at the overall performance so far this year. Here you can see the results. In this chart you can see the week number on the x-axis and the number of hours practiced on the y-axis. You can see the actual practice, which is the red line, the average practice, the yellow line, and the planned practice, the pink line. As you can tell, I did most of my weeks as planned. There was a drop in week 27, 28, and 29 as I was on a vacation. Here I also had a big drop in my planned practice as I didn't want to go to bring my piano on my vacation. Anyway, making up for the 3 weeks took some time, but adding a few extra hours before and after the vacation, I eventually got on track so that my average was the intended 10 hours per week. Then what you can see is that the personal performance was good. At the bottom you can see how much I practiced in total over the 37 weeks. Not bad. So there you have it. Do you think that you can practice 10 hours or more per week? And more importantly, can you practice focused and turn off all external and internal distractions? If you do, picture a number of hours that you want to practice every single week. Now, imagine that you actually did this every single week. Where do you think that you will be in a year from now if you practice this much every single week? If you want to get the Google Sheets document that I was using, then click the link found under this video and I will give you detailed instructions on how to use it, and I made it so it will be a lot easier for you to practice, and then the best of it all, you can have it for free. And of course, I hope that you found this video inspiring and that you are at least a little more motivated now to practice piano consistently. To practice jazz piano can be hard, but once you make it, it's extremely fulfilling. And of course, I hope to see you again. And whatever you do, take care of your music. This is Jeremy Sivertsen, and I will see you soon as Spoon.